the Fred Whitton Challenge. This has to be the hardest cyclosportive in the UK. It's an epic day out. Big hills, fantastic landscape, brilliant sense of community. You're going to have a fantastic time. And I guess if you're listening to this podcast, stroke vodcast, yep, this is going to be up on our YouTube channel as well, then I guess you've probably been drawn in the ballot and you're looking forward to, with some trepidation, your Fred Whitton Challenge in May. It always comes really early season. Now, considering that the weather outside right now is frightful and your opportunity for getting some good quality training time in is diminishing rapidly, this podcast then is going to be all about helping you with some great training ideas, and then we're going to go through a proper talk through of the entire route. I'm going to try and share some of my experience and some of the experience of some of my athletes who have done all sorts of different times across the Fred Whittons over the last few years, and see if we can make sure that you are as prepared as possible to have a really successful day out on your big challenge. It's going to be a big day. I want to start with 5 top tips that if you've got these phrases in your mind over the next few weeks while you're finishing off your training, then you're going to be in a good place. Now, the first one is about fatigue management. Now, there is not an awful lot of time between when you're watching this podcast and the Fred Whitton. You tend to come out of the winter and it arrives very, very quickly with just a few weeks training to go. And your opportunity to actually gain much more fitness has probably diminished. I'm sorry, but we need to sort of face up to that harsh reality. We're not going to gain an awful lot of speed. We're going to gain some, but really where you are now with your fitness and your speed is probably about where you're going to be in about 12 weeks time, but in a much better position to be able to complete that 12-hour ride with an awful lot more enjoyment. When I talk about fatigue management, any time now that you are injured or ill is going to quickly eat into your valuable training time. Think about it as mitigation, if you like, rather than actual fitness building. How we can do this is really make sure you start eating really healthily, really taking care of your training. It is so easy for you to get full of enthusiasm and now start to overtrain, and that's what leads to injuries and also putting on loads and loads of miles, going out there and then overeating massively, eating all the wrong things, and your body builds up an awful lot of residual stress and cortisol, and we open ourselves up to the greater chance of injury and illness. Please don't do that. Keep yourself really well nourished and on the right side of fatigue management, and you should arrive at the Fred Whitton Challenge fresh and ready to go. That is the important thing. The worst thing that can happen is any sort of injury. With that in mind then, let's see if we can set some sort of goals. And the best way to do this really is to go through your old Strava rides and come up with some kind of an average speed that's, you know, that you can hold for a good 5 hours. Now 5 hours is a really critical time in training because you kind of burnt through the calories that you got from your last meal, and you're having to be self-sufficient on what you're carrying with you. So that skill of an endurance rider is constantly keeping on top of the calories, eating, drinking, maintaining your body's homeostasis, if you like, whilst you're still doing exercise. So 5 hours is a great time. Find a speed that you think you can ride for 5 hours. Bring that up by the 181 kilometers or 113 miles of the Fred Whitton Challenge, and you should come up with some sort of an idea of an estimated finishing time. Now, this is a good place to have set your goal from. Now, remember that the Fred Whitton is hilly, but you go downhill as much as you go uphill. And I think this 5 hours is normally pretty good. Now, with that in mind, we can then come back to our fatigue management and start thinking about some of our training and the idea that endurance is a skill. Now, what I mean by that is over the next few weeks, one of the best things you can do is start to mitigate all the potential problems. And that is because to finish first, or finish with the time that you really, really want, first you have to make sure you finish. Now, and that means eating, drinking, make sure your bike is in really, really good condition, make sure your body is in really good condition. It's a long time to be on a bike. And if you're going to be cramping or you have a sore back or sore neck, anything like that, then now is the time to get that sorted, because pain anywhere in the body is going to slow you down. It's going to demand energy. It's going to demand that willpower. And I was once reminded on this of a really, really long endurance race in France. And I was sort of arguing about the skill in some sports is really obvious, but the skill in endurance is actually in the person's internal dials and switches, if you like, where we constantly go, what's that I'm feeling? How do I mitigate that? Do I eat something? Do I drink something? What does my body want? Does it want nourishment? Does it want carbohydrate? Does it want protein? How do I make sure I'm not chafed? How do I make sure my muscles are in good condition? I'm mobile, I'm flexible. All of those things go into the big bucket of skills that is the endurance athlete. And so anything you can do to make yourself as comfortable as possible and it's in tune with your body as possible is going to be a big help. Cool. Now, with that in mind, let's think about some of your riding. Now, on the Fred Whitton website, there is actually a really good training plan, and I think you should definitely check it out. They've done a really good job considering it's literally one page, and they start with about 6 hours. So for some of you who maybe aren't doing 6 hours a week training, this is going to be quite what we call a big improvement rate, which just to be aware of. Some of you might already be doing this and find that this isn't actually enough to get the target time that you want. But for a one-pager, I think it's pretty spot on. It's got all those rest days in there, and those rest days are important. And more importantly, it's got the frequency, and the frequency is just as important. One of the biggest mistakes that people make is they go, got to get the miles in, and the way that they do that is they plan this absolutely epic ride at the weekend with big hills, big mileage. They rest up and towards it to make sure they can get around it, because maybe they're going out with a friend and they go and do this epic ride and they suffer. They've got the DOMs the next few days, the bum is sore, the hands are sore. They've come back from that ride, they've eaten the contents of the fridge, because why wouldn't you? Done 3,000, 4,000 calories in a ride, and then you're knackered. And so you take Monday off and Tuesday, you do something on the turbo trainer on a Wednesday, but by that time you're thinking, I've got another really, really big ride to do at the weekend. And this method of training is really counterproductive, because you're not training frequently enough to make any training gains. All you're doing is every weekend you make a training gain, and then throughout the week that training gain diminishes. So you end up with pretty much a net zero. Now, the training program they've put together is pretty good because it spaces them out, and it gives you a time to do a hard ride and some longer endurance ride and the rest in between, which is really important. The only thing that's really, really missing is not telling you exactly the intensity, and that is important because those long rides need to be done really easy, like way easier than you're going to ride on the day. I mean, like really easy, because all you're trying to do is spend time in the saddle. So hours are really important. You're trying to make sure that your body can create energy efficiently, aerobically. That's the purpose of those, and specificity, that time in the saddle, practice with your nutrition, with your hydration. That's the purpose. It's not to go fast. The purpose of the shorter rides on that training schedule, they need to be hard and you need to be well rested for it. So if you've gone easy on your endurance rides, you should have the energy. You should have recovered quickly enough and not come back home and eaten the contents of the fridge, and should be able to ride those at maximum capacity. And they can be somewhere quite local, and recommend doing it on a ride where you can go really hard and all you've got to do is ride back to the car. There's no holding something back thinking that you might bonk or not get there. Just drive out to a big hill, do big reps, go hard, be furious, and then eat a good, nutritious recovery meal, and then take that rest day. And that's how you're going to get those fitness gains you're after. So short and hard, or long and easy, is the way to do that. And all the time, you're learning about your body, you're eating the right things. And with all that in mind then, if I'm going to leave you one more top tip before we get into the actual ride, and that is be specific. Now, it's going to be really easy, especially in today's modern world of lots of turbo trainers and Zwift, to just jump on the turbo trainer and start doing things like Zwift racing or out to Zwift, thinking that that's good quality training. Just want you to have a think about the type of riding you're going to be doing on the Fred Whitton, and it doesn't necessarily match up with what you might be doing on something like Zwift. Now, on the Fred Whitton, you're going to be doing long distances of fairly undulating terrain, nice and easy, eating, drinking, aerobic, riding in a group. So standing sequoias if you're on Zwift and keeping it easy. On the hard sections, it's nothing like Alpe d'Huez Zwift. It's nothing like a Zwift race. You're not going to be riding anything like that. If anything, look for a workout where you've got sections where you're going to be at VO2 max, and then a sustained period of tempo afterwards. That's the sort of workouts that you want to be looking at. Big sprint intervals as well are pretty useful, that sort of stuff. So hards, easies is a good way to think about it. So with that in mind then, before we switch on to the route, I want to go through another really cool document that is on the Fred Whitton website, which is definitely worthy of your attention. And it looks like this year they're sponsored by the guys from Kendall Mint Co., which is great. These actually are really, really good nutritious products, and I definitely recommend you checking them out. However, their nutrition plan is probably a little bit on the carbohydrate rich side, and I'll just give you a little heads up with that. The one day prior and you're leading up to it, yes, definitely, please probably cut back down on the alcohol, if not give it up completely for a little while. Again, about fatigue management and mitigating that chance of being unwell. But also we want to think about two things. One, fueling your workouts, and two is nourishing your recovery. Those two statements will be really strong in your mind. You're not going to lose weight in the next few weeks before you start the Fred Whitton. So don't think about taking on a calorie deficit or anything like that to try and shed pounds. It's not really enough time to make a big difference on that. What will happen is if you try and do your hard workouts on a calorie deficit, you'll end up in a pickle. But if you go out on those nice, long, slow endurance rides and you keep it easy, you should be able to come back, have a good, nutritious, wholesome dinner, no matter what that might look like for you. Actually, on the day, some of the advice they give is really cool. Like I say, it's a little bit on the carbohydrate-rich side for me. I think you would probably struggle to digest quite this quantity of simple carbohydrates. Now, the gels that they do are great. I would definitely check these out. I really like them. They're probably about right. But if you try and survive the entire Fred Whitton on this, you are going to end up with mouth ulcers. You're going to end up with a very acidic stomach and feel quite ill, even if you have like their sports drink as well. And that's just simple carbohydrate that goes straight into your blood system very, very quickly, maintains the blood glucose. Fantastic for when you are going to be hitting those big climbs. In between that time, you need to be thinking about much more nutritious food, and the longer the ride, the more normal the food. I would recommend sort of things like this from Velo Forte. They've just got some more natural ingredients in them that come with other nutrients. Something like a bigger, heavier bar from Chia Charge is worth a look as well. But also, just think normal food from the supermarket. I really like sort of cheeses. Mini Baby Bells are great. There's an awful lot of calories in that, and it's quite nice on the teeth. So if you've been having lots of sugary stuff, it's quite nice to have something that's a bit more alkaline. That calms everything down. Also with salts, like quite like dried sausage. Again, the high fat content is an awful lot of calories in quite a small amount of weight. So find things that will work for you, but please don't go so super sugar. There's probably only a very few of the very, very fastest riders in doing out rides around the 6 hour mark that can probably get around on just pure energy gels. Anyone else, the duration that you're going to be out on the course, definitely recommend having something a bit more substantial in your back pocket. Other than that, the advice is great. Flick through it. Yeah, there's some really good stuff. The website is just getting better and better. Okay, let's have a look at the route then and see if we can just share some knowledge. I think what I'm going to try and do in this podcast really is to try and imagine as if we were a bunch of mates sat around having a brew, talking about past experiences and seeing if we can't help you on your first ride or your second ride, whatever it is, and see if we can't learn something together. I've done the route several times. I've done it supporting people in the race, in the event, not a race. And I've done it several times from my front door as well. Luckily, we live quite close. Now, the route starts in Grasmere. I think you hopefully know that by now. It's a beautiful, picturesque, traditional village just outside Ambleside in the Lake District. And the event centre is going to be on a sort of a field. And over the last few years, we've had fantastic weather. We have had bad ones in the past. We've had snow and hail and sleet. And oh my God, the weather sometimes has been appalling. But the last few editions of the Fred Whitton Challenge have been graced with some beautiful weather. But keep an eye on that weather forecast. That weather forecast is so important. You are going to be parking on a field. The marshals are fantastic. They'll tell you exactly where to park. If it's going to be muddy, please bring some welly boots because you're definitely going to appreciate having those. The field actually drains pretty well, to be fair. Now, start times. If you are going to be chasing the cut-offs, then absolutely no doubt about it. Start as absolutely early as you can. If you're anything between like an 8, sort of 9 to 7 hour time, just keep an eye on the weather forecast. The weather forecast, you just watch it like a hawk and try and time it as best as you possibly can to want to make sure that starting in the dry is more important than finishing in the dry. If the longer you can stay dry, the better, especially in those early stages when your body's still warming up. Your body could take a good hour to warm up, but once it's warmed up, if it's wet, it can cope with that a bit more. I would much rather do the last hour in the wet than the first hour because it will take a long time for your clothes to dry. And once you've got wet gloves, you get wet hands, whereas you can normally tolerate an hour of wetness, if you like, just to get you to the finish line. So keep an eye on that weather forecast. One of the big mistakes that people make is that they put on way too many clothes at the start, and they will. I don't blame them because it's freezing cold at that early in the Lake District in May. It's going to be a cold start, but I tell you, the amount of people that I've seen later on over Hardknot at like 2:00 in the afternoon when the sun is up and they're still wearing their overshoes and they're still wearing their long tights and they've just tried to stuff all their waterproofs in their back pocket, and it's not pretty. So be bold. Start cold, keep an eye on that weather forecast. Don't be one of those people that ends up dragging around all of your kit or having such sweaty feet because you've worn your overshoes. There's probably no need for that. Okay, so we set off then, and you set off nice and flat, heading down towards the town of Ambleside, and it's going to be pretty cold, like I say. Just get on with it. It's like there's no easy way to say about it. It's not going to be a particularly pleasant way to start. It's going to be really quite early in the morning. You probably travelled a fair distance, probably haven't slept well. Make sure you've eaten something before you start. For God's sake, get those first few miles done. You will not be long until you start going uphill and you start sweating, I promise you. But the first few kilometres are pretty grim. After that, we turn up, we go up Holbeck Lane, and that starts your Fred Whitton in my eyes. That's a fairly steep climb, not for necessarily what you'll be doing today, but in terms of other people that live in the country, it's a fairly steep climb. And that's going to lead you on to the Kirkstone Pass. Kirkstone Pass is the longest, but probably the easiest big climb of the entire Fred Whitton. It doesn't really get that steep. There's a couple of steep sections in it, but generally speaking, my advice here is go easy. Really, really easy. And that's going to be easier said than done because there are going to be people who are full of energy and full of enthusiasm, pumped up on adrenaline, and they're going to be trying to ride past you, probably saying some stupid things as they go, but just let them go. Like, just do your own thing. Keep it easy. You shouldn't really be breaking too much of a sweat up here. You definitely shouldn't be hunting for breath. You should be on a nice, easy gear, just pedaling out the miles. Just take it easy. Let those people go past you. I swear you will see them again at the side of a road in a lot of pain. Like, there's no need to go hard over the Kirkstone Pass. Just keep it within yourself. At the top, you get to see the beautiful Kirkstone Inn, and the descent, it starts off actually it's quite a rough road. It is quite a fast descent, and it's pretty much in a straight line. There are corners, obviously, but it's okay. You can generally see a long way in front of you. The cars are okay. It's sort of wide enough. It's it's fine. The only thing to look out for really is at the top. It is quite bumpy, so really make sure you're down on the drops. You've got a good grip of your handlebars, and you're watching your line. Try and stay on your line because it is a fast descent, and you'll find that really experienced riders will come belting down there super fast. And if you're a bit nervous and you're sort of steering around potholes, probably the biggest danger here is other riders crashing into you because they'll be going so fast. There's no way that they're going to stop. So heat your head up, pick a line, stick to that line, and just try and be as smooth as you possibly can down the Kirkstone Pass, and you will have a great time. You go past Brothers Water and heading north now, and you're going to get to the towns of Matterdale. This is where you really need to start thinking about feeding if you haven't done already, because you don't have an awful lot of time before you can hit your next big hill. So as soon as you can get your hands off the handlebars because you finish that descent, start eating. I know it's really early on, but honestly, the Fred Whitton challenge is like a man versus calories competition. Just keep eating. About a quarter of the way down the lake, you're going to take a left-hand turn, and there's a sneaky climb here that people forget about, but it's actually way bigger than a lot of people give it respect for, and that takes you up to Matterdale End. It's a beast of a climb. There's no doubt about it. And if it wasn't for all the other climbs in the Fred Whitton challenge, it would probably be quite notable. So don't get caught out by that. Make sure you're fueled up for it. Again, take it easy. There is a long way to go. Do not hammer it up this. You still got plenty to go at, I promise you. Just let people ride past you. They'll be full of enthusiasm. Just let them go. Ride your own event. So after that, we descend. We eventually make it our way to Troutbeck and get ourselves onto the A66 section, which sometimes it just passes by and you just roll it down and it's absolutely fine. Other times it can feel horrible and treacherous and quite scary. It's the main road between the ports of Workington, Whitehaven, Maryport, and the towns of Carlisle, Newcastle and Glasgow, etc. So it's a fairly busy road. It has some big lorries and stuff on it at times. They have improved it. There is a bit of a cycleway, but you won't be using too much of it. And it's one of those things where everyone tries to get into a big group and get a slipstream going, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes those groups are just going too fast and you just got to let them go. If you're struggling to keep up with them, just let them go. That's not helping your ride. Just do your own thing, I promise you. Do not get carried away with something that's going too fast for you. This gets them to be some quite sort of dangerous overtaking as people jostle for position. No one really wants to take the front. So don't be the person on the front. Try and avoid dragging like another 100 riders behind you. Just do your own thing. Let people come past. Nobody really wants to overtake because of all the traffic and everything else. So the best advice I've got in here is just to get it done. Really, it is literally stay safe, do your own pace, and just let people be mental around you and just stay in a straight line. So as you put into Keswick, then this is where things start getting interesting. The beautiful town of Keswick. By this time, everything should have warmed up a little bit. If the weather's going to be fine, you probably feel a little bit more confident with the ride. You've got some good chunk of it out of the way, and you're about to head down a gorgeous Borrowdale Valley, and it really is lovely. This is the first time you really turn into the mountains and you really just see the big Lake District landscape in front of you. It's a big touristy town. The Borrowdale Valley Road is it's not quite wide enough for two cars in a lot of places, and so when there's an awful lot of bikes there, you're going to get a lot of car drivers getting quite angsty. And there's quite a lot of riders around at this point. And because you haven't really spread out, you can probably imagine the situation. It's hard to get a group going. There's lots of undulations. You're constantly going uphill, downhill a little bit. Not lots, just constantly breaking the pack apart. There's tight corners. It's really hard to keep a group nice and tight in this area. So I wouldn't bother trying. And also, the road is actually really quite bumpy. It's just churned up. It's just a mountain road. So there's good parts of it, but generally speaking, I would again just do your own thing down here and not get too worried about other people. Just stay safe and don't worry about trying to keep up with groups and that sort of thing. Eat as much as you possibly can, and your big key for this is once you've gone past the lake, that's when you start heading towards your first big challenge. So start putting in the carbohydrates. That's the time for an energy gel, if ever there was one, because at the bottom of the valley, you take a right-hand turn and you start getting your first glimpse of the Honister Pass. Honister is probably your first big challenge. Up until now, the hills have been fairly easy. Honister is the first one that is just going to hit you in the face. It starts off really steep. And I mean like really, really steep. And you'll be out the saddle. You'll be breathing really hard. This is like a VO2 max climb. And you'll get up the first ramp and you'll take a little left and it will ease off, but you're still going to be pushing above your normal threshold. So this is what I mean by about being specific with your training. You need to be doing those efforts where you go really hard into VO2 max, but then drop it down, not to fully rest, but just holding it at that hard intensity after having done a really big, hard VO2 max, which you don't tend to do on a lot of like Zwifty type rides. But get it done. It's actually a really cool climb. Once you're past that first ramp, it's actually just quite a good fun climb, and you will enjoy it. And the views are fantastic, and the support from everyone is fantastic. Takes you up to the top of Honister, and this is probably where the event probably sees its most amount of accidents and tragedy. It's because this is the first steep descent, and if anyone's not prepared for it, they soon find out on this descent. And it's really sad because it's there's quite a lot of accidents that happen on this, and you'll see that there'll be marshals everywhere telling you. And just my advice here is honestly take a moment at the top. You don't necessarily have to stop, but definitely just slow down, like zip your jersey up because you've probably undone that as you've been doing the ride. Just check your gloves, give your brakes a little squeeze, make sure everything's okay. Just have a quick look down at your bike. Are your tyres all right? This is the first descent that you're going to make since you've set off, really, that's really going to challenge you and your bike. And it is steep, it is bumpy as well, and there's quite some fairly steep hairpins on it. So just take your time. If you've not been to the Lake District before and you've done any of these passes, just don't rush. You know, you're not going to make up loads and loads of time by bombing down this at a speed that you're not comfortable with. Just get to the bottom in one piece. Again, endurance is a skill. You've got to be at the finish line, so just bear that in mind. So at the bottom then, you're going to roll along the valley and you're going to start heading towards the first feed station. Now, should you stop or not? Well, my opinion is probably not, but that does depend on whether you've got support on other parts of the course. A really popular place to get support is on the top of Whinlatter. I'll talk about that in a second. So if you know that you're likely to be meeting up with someone, that's maybe probably wouldn't stop. If you need a poo, go for a poo. Like sort your body out. Like stop, go and sort it out because you've got a long way to go until anything else like that. If it's a really, really hot day, probably go and top up my water. Otherwise, I would either not stop or make sure that any time I spend in feed station 1 is kept to an absolute minimum. You can really suck up time because it's so busy. By the time you put your bike down and queued up for the toilets and then got a bar and then got yourself sorted again and got back out again, you can be eating into some valuable ride time, which if you're going for a good time, then you don't need to do that. And the other thing is that you're about to hit another big climb. So just like to keep the legs moving at this point, really, rather than sort of letting the cafe legs sit in. So that's my advice. I would probably, unless it was really, really hot and unless I was feeling particularly uncomfortable and I need to go to the toilet, I'd probably just ride straight past this one. That's entirely up to you. Now, the Newlands Pass then, it's a great climb, but the unfortunate thing is it's a really popular tourist destination. And there'll be cars parked everywhere, and there'll be cars trying to come up behind you, cars coming towards you. There's not enough room for everybody. It's a total nightmare, and it's not going to be pleasant, to be honest, because you're not going to have the sort of the maneuverability while you're trying to cycle a bike really hard up a hill to really get out of their way. It's just a bit unpleasant to start with. It does get easier as you go up. Everything sort of widens up a little bit, and it gets steeper. It's a beautiful valley once you're past all that madness at the bottom, but it's, just, I don't know what advice to give, really. Just be prepared for it. It's going to be annoying. The descent off it is actually a real mixture, and it's quite bumpy in places. It's also really popular with the outdoor centres, and you'll often find minibuses and school groups that have been doing gill scrambling in that area. So just be wary. There's loads of sheep as well, and there's quite a lot of cattle grids. There's just hazards kind of everywhere, to be fair. But it's a great time to eat. It's actually quite hard to eat because you're constantly going uphill, downhill, avoiding a pothole, going around a corner, avoiding a child, avoiding a sheep, avoiding another rider. It's quite easy to not eat because there's so much sort of going on at this point, but you really have to try and eat because you've got Whinlatter Pass coming up pretty soon, and you're definitely going to need to get some calories down you, especially if you haven't stopped at Feed Station 1. This is your opportunity to feed and feed well. So bear that in mind. You just might need to just slow down a little bit and just take note of those hazards and just eat on the move. Now, fun bit coming up there, and I promise you, is the Whinlatter Pass. And I love this climb, actually. It's actually really, really cool. It goes through the woods. You've got this beautiful valley on the left-hand side. Sort of feels like you're leaving the touristy areas behind now. And sort of Whinlatter is like a fantastic forest park. And for a big family day out, it's epic. So if you are coming up here with your family, this is a really good place for them to meet. They might have to get up really early and get there. But there's a Go Ape there. There's fantastic mountain bike trails. There's mountain bike coaching. The guys at CycleWise do good cycle hire. It's a good place to spend the day, especially if you're planning to meet someone and give them a water bottle and take some clothes off them, that sort of thing. There is good parking there, not necessarily at the forest centre, but further down as well. You will have to get there early. Don't guarantee it, I'd say. I wouldn't put all your eggs in one basket and relying on meeting up with someone, but there's a good chance that that's going to be a good place to meet. Now, the top of Whinlatter, and the other reason it was a good place to start is probably this is your decision time. Obviously, you've gone past the checkpoint here. You've either been sent down the line and the lamb route to return back to Grasmere if you've been timed out. But also, this marks the time where once you've crossed here, you cross into much more rural Cumbria, and getting someone to pick you up or the event staff to collect you becomes much more of a logistical challenge. There's just mountains in the way. And if you have a mechanical on this side of the mountain, it's a bigger deal. So if your bike isn't working very well, if you're already getting cramp, if you're already sore, then you've got a long way to go in quite a remote part of the world. So just bear that in mind. It's not an easy place to retire from once you've gone over the summit of Whinlatter. But if you can have in your mind that Whinlatter is where you need to get to in really good condition, if you can be at the top of there thinking, yeah, this is great, I'm having a great day out, then you're going to do really, really, really well. If you're at the top of Whinlatter, bent over your handlebars, exhausted, with cramp, you're in for a really horrible time. So if everything you've done up until now is to get you to Whinlatter feeling fantastic, and you've gone possibly even kicking yourself because you've gone a bit too slowly, you haven't. You've done everything right. If you're out there thinking, oh, I'm a little bit behind schedule, good. If you're there feeling good and just a little bit behind schedule, brilliant. That is, yes, you're doing it. It's the way to do it. Now, so with that in mind, let's bomb off. It's a really fast descent. There is loads of debris on the roads, and experienced riders will be flying down there, because if you head up, you can see for miles, and you can just pick a line and just get some real speed up. But it is a forest. It is May. It's often quite twigs and just debris on the road, and that sort of thing. So just honestly, keep your head up, keep looking ahead, and you'll be absolutely fine. Once you've got to the bottom of that, you're going through the villages of High Lawton, and you'll very soon start to experience rural Cumbria, and it's a beautiful part of the world. It can be really, really windy. The wind just comes in from the Irish Sea, and it's either going to be a headwind or a side wind. Most of the time, it's like an awkward combination of the two. And you're going to pick your way through some lovely country lanes. It's way more undulating than people give it credit for. It goes up and down a lot. It's quite energy sapping, quite hard riding. It never really lets you get into a rhythm. It's just sort of energy sapping. So you get yourself into the water point, and you've done Cold Fell. Cold Fell actually is a horrible climb. It's also still the wind. It's really exposed. It goes on forever. It's one of those things where if you at Whinlatter and you were listening to what I said about being fresh, you'll understand what I meant by the time you've experienced Cold Fell. It is one of those climbs that is just like a war of attrition. You just need to get on with it. It's but anyway, we'll head our way down, and we will eventually end up, after heading south for what seems like forever, at Calder Bridge. And this is where you can start getting excited, because the end is in sight. The exciting stuff, the stuff that you wanted to come and do, is coming up. There is another timeout here, and you'll get picked up by the van if you have to, because things start turning epic now. At this feed station, it's definitely worth stopping. You probably have exhausted quite a lot of the food you can carry with you by this point, and will appreciate having some more, especially if they've got something fresh like bananas. It's definitely worth taking that on board. Now, at this feed station, there is like this weird pent-up anxiety knowing that Hardknot Pass is coming, but it's actually still quite a long way to go. So have some really good normal food here and set off down the valley. You've got all the time to get to Eskdale Green. You'll be seeing Lal Ratti, which is like a little half-scale steam engine. There's some fantastic big mansion houses. It's just a stunning valley. And all the time, you can almost feel this like apprehension you can cut with a knife going down the valley of everyone going, Hardknot Pass, and just eating, eating. So I wouldn't worry about having really sugary stuff until you've gone past Eskdale Green, and definitely get some gels in you by then. It takes about 10-15 minutes for a gel to work its way through your system, so you've still got a bit to go. And then eventually you will see Hardknot Pass. This is that classic telephone box up against a dry stone wall. It's so quintessentially English, it's unreal. And that big sign that sticks up, covered in cycling stickers now, of just 30% gradient, and you'll look up and you'll see a cattle grid and carnage. When you see it for the first time, it really strikes you as to how hard this is going to be, and that's only the start of it. Really, there will be an amazing atmosphere. If the weather is good, there will be people out, people cheering you on, and the atmosphere is electric, and you're going to love it. But yeah, just go for it. It's great. If you can ride the whole thing, you can ride the whole thing. If you can't, you end up getting off. Be safe. You're not going to lose loads of time by walking. If I'm completely honest, it's the difference between you walking and someone riding is really, really negligible. So don't worry about that too much. The focus of your training shouldn't be about getting up Hardknot Pass. The focus of your training should be about doing all the undulations and the endurance to actually get there in the first place. So with that in mind, set off. You're going to be at VO2 max. Your lungs are going to be on fire. Your heart rate is going to be the highest you've ever known it for the longest you've ever known it. There will be people cheering you on, and you'll be so determined mostly because you'll be terrified of actually unclipping. And definitely people fall over. There's no doubt about it. They'll just get to the point where they stop, they can't unclip, and they just sort of collapse on the side. And it's actually quite annoying to ride sometimes because you're trying to ride a line and you're absolutely at your limit and you just try to hold your bike on a line and there's someone in front of you who's just having a nightmare, and you can't get out of their way. They can't get out of your way. You get the idea. Everyone is just there trying the hardest. I promise you, it is what it is. Now, when you get to the top, and you will get to the top, stop. Because you're about to go down one of the most treacherous descents you've probably ever done, especially if you've never been up to the Lake District before. And you are going to be sweaty. Your helmet's going to be at a wonky angle because you probably pushed it up and wiped the sweat out your eyes. Your eyes are going to be bleeding. Your lungs are going to be on fire. You've probably undone your jersey. And now, at this massively high heart rate, you're about to do one of the most dangerous descents you can do on a road bike. So just stop for a few seconds, calm down, zip your jersey up, have something to eat, have something to drink. Doesn't have to be long, just 10 seconds is enough, and those 10 seconds are worth it. And then get yourself ready, be on the drops, have a good grip of the bars. If you can't do that, something to practice. Remember, endurance is a skill. Really hold on to the handlebars, one finger braking, and balance the bike. You want both front and back wheel to have contact with the ground. You still want that weight on the front wheel so that you can steer. You want to keep that weight balanced, so you are going to need to be pushing back on the handlebars, hovering off the back wheel a little bit, but you're trying to maintain equal pressure on both wheels, really. It is bumpy. There'll be people all over the place. There'll be people out of control, panicking, trying to put their foot down, not really being able to put their foot down because they're at such an extreme angle. There are really, really steep bends that if you hit the wall, you'll go over the wall and into a ravine. And we've seen some horrible accidents down here over the years. And there will be marshals everywhere telling you to be careful, and they're absolutely right. Please heed their advice. This is it's a dangerous descent when you're doing it if you have stopped at the top, let alone having gone to the top at VO2 max, at high heart rate, sweaty, fatigued. Just please be careful. Anyway, let's get down to the bottom. Cockley Beck. It's a beautiful little valley, actually, really, really remote. Some lovely boulders down there. It's beautiful. And you will eventually ride, keep eating, eat. Wrynose Pass is just ahead of you. Comes up really quick. Actually, Wrynose isn't that bad. You'll get up most of it without really noticing. It's a bit more like the Kirkstone Pass, and then get steep towards the top. By that time, it's fairly short and you can just power on through, get there. This is probably the worst descent, harder even than Hardknot. You don't arrive at it quite in the same level of Rocky Balboa being beaten up, but it's pretty damn close. Again, just take a pause, get it under control, zip your jersey up, get a good grip of the handlebars. If you set off with your hands on the hoods, and you later decide that you need to be on the drops, it's too late. You won't be able to. It takes an awful lot of skill, more skill than I know most riders have, to take your hands from the hoods down onto the drops where you want them to be. So set off in that position, like straighten your back. Everything is going to be sore at this point. Your back's going to be hurting. It's the last position that you want to be in. Your leg's going to be absolutely burning. And the last thing you want to be doing is hovering off the saddle in like a semi-standing position with your muscles time under tension. And again, this is how accidents happen. It's because people haven't done their mobility, they haven't done their stretching, they haven't looked after their body, and they're going to do all of that riding, and then they're going to be under 10 minutes worth of descending, time under tension with their muscles halfway between straight and contracted, and it's really quite uncomfortable. And this is where people's legs start shaking, the lactate builds up, and eventually that fatigue sets in and they have a little accident. They just can't get off the bike. You're such an extreme angle. So just practice, be safe, please. If you set off being safe and in control, you will stay in control. If you set off wild and carefree, you'll get to a point where you suddenly want to be in control, and getting your hands where you want to be and getting your body position back to where it wants to be is harder. So be ready. At the bottom, there is a really nasty cattle grid. There'll be loads of marshals there telling you about this cattle grid, but you'll still see people have accidents there. Let's on a more friendly note, we're not quite there yet, because you're going to go down the valley a little way, eat. This is an opportunity to get some food down you. There is still a long way to go, and you're going to turn left and you're going to go up to Blea Tarn. This is that climb that they put in when they change location, which just takes you up another hill. It always gets quite washed out. There's always quite a lot of pebbles and stones and rocks and stuff like that. So it's somewhere where people get punctures quite a lot, because there's just quite a lot of stuff that gets washed off the mountains here, and it's really frustrating if you get a puncture this close to the end. So heads up, and honestly, this is where you see the most amount of carnage, and if you've been pacing it really well, you will be riding past all of that carnage, and you will be strong and you'll be powerful and you'll be riding past it. If you've overcooked it, you'll be bonked at the side of the road, and you the amount of times I've seen really, really fit people on amazing bikes going 5 kph up there, barely able to turn the pedals, and there will be someone who is on like a bike they got from Halford, so you wouldn't believe it actually made it down Wrynose Pass in one piece, suddenly comes riding past you going, hiya, you're right, do you want a bar? Don't be that person. Pace your ride intelligently, because this is the bit where the wheels do fall off your wagon. Now, at the top there, we've got one more descent to do, which is the descent down Blea Tarn. It is short, but it's steep. There are lots and lots of hairpins on it. Again, there are marshals everywhere, because right now everyone is tired. No one's really paying attention as to where other riders are. They're just trying to get to the end now. Everyone's sort of in survival mode. Be super careful. At the bottom there is a really treacherous cattle grid that goes into like a really greasy, there's quite a lot of sheep and cattle around there, so it's always a bit covered in like cow feces and stuff, so it's pretty horrible. You go around the corner and you're into the Langdale Valley, the old Dungeon Gill, that beautiful valley, and you've got this fantastic ride ahead of you. It is undulating. On a normal day, if you hadn't done the Fred Whitton, you'd be thinking it is virtually flat. But if you've just done the Fred Whitton, you will be thinking, oh my God, every single little hill feels like a mountain right now. But just keep rolling with it. This is actually a good time to get into like a little group and buddy up with someone and see if you can smash it along the valley as best you possibly can. It is beautiful actually, and the local cycling club, Kendal Cycling Club, shout out to you guys, will be there, and they'll be cheering you on, and they've got like a little gazebo, and they'll be giving out sweets, and even though you're so close, just a handful of sweets right now is just really, really appreciated. Just give them a wave and just enjoy everyone just cheering you back into the finish. After that, you've got a fair few twists and turns to go. Again, marshals on all the junctions. You're going to go through the town of Ambleside. Again, just keep heads up. All the marshals are wearing bright yellow vests. Just look ahead. Like, if you're looking down at your cycle computer feeling sorry for yourself, you're going to miss something. So keep looking up, look for the marshals. They'll be pointing you where to go, and you are almost there. Once you've gone past the town of Rydal, you will start recognising it because you've already ridden it in the opposite direction all those hours ago. and now you can start really celebrating because you're so close. There will still be people dying a slow, horrible, bonking death as you ride past them, and hopefully if you paced it really well, you'll still be feeling fresh and you can be just going hell for leather and going for your good time through all of this sort of stuff. So, and then get to the finish line. Congratulations, you will make it, and it'll be amazing. But my top tip here is, even if you've got friends and family waiting for you, just get through the process. There's an awful lot of people, especially if you're sort of finishing in the mid-bunch, which tends to be between 7 and 9 hours, which is where most people try to finish. It will get busy really, really quickly. Just go and get your certificate, go and get your meal, go and get sorted with all the right admin, because once you sort of left the system, it's really hard to get back into it. So just work your way through the system, get it done, and then go and see all your friends and family and have a beer and all that sort of stuff. And that's it. You will do it. If you've done all your fatigue management in your training, you've really thought about it, you've mitigated all the potential problems, you've had your bike serviced, your body's in a good position, you're well fed, you're well hydrated, you can pace it really well, you will get around it and you will have an amazing day out. If you ignore all of that advice and you don't do any training and you turn up with a bike that isn't fit for purpose, and you go out too fast, you are going to have a horrible, miserable time. And you don't want that to happen, because it is an absolutely epic day out and you're going to love every moment of it on reflection. Brilliant. Well, I hope this was useful to you. It's definitely brought back some memories to me. I think I'm supporting some people on the route this year as well. So maybe you'll see me, maybe you won't. And good luck and let me know how it goes.